Well, hello and welcome to another in our series of Choice Words videos where we get to speak to the great and the good of wealth management and find out what makes them tick. I'm Julian Marr, I'm Editorial Director of Wealthwise Media, and today I'm delighted to be talking to Ben Goss, CEO of Dynamic Planner. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Julian. Great to be here.
Oh,
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's good energy. Let's keep that one going. Yes, I don't normally bring people down to my level, but that's a good start. Thanks, Ben. Let's jump straight into my first question, which in this case with you is, so what qualities in your experience drive a successful wealth management business, do you think?
That is a great question and a big one, of course. I mean, from where we sit, you know, our purpose, if you like, we talk about being able to help wealth managers unlock trusted advice, unlock access to their trusted advice. Why do we exist? Simply because delivering advice and delivering wealth management is historically been really hard, but it's really important. You know, the end clients value it, they want it, more people want it than get it. So I guess my answer to that question would be, you know, what does it take to really unlock access to trusted wealth advice if you're a wealth manager? That comes down to a few things, doesn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, this is very much a people business. I'm sure in this conversation we'll get on to the role of technology and AI. But fundamentally, your finances and managing your wealth is a peculiarly individual thing. As human beings, we are pretty risk averse. On average, we're wired to value avoiding losses twice as much as we like getting gains. Yeah, behavioural finance.
Very good.
If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to use another kind of framework, unless we have the base sorted, unless we are secure, food, shelter, warmth, all of which has to be paid for, right? Whether you are in the accumulation phase and thinking about the future, whether you are in retirement phase and drawing down on your pots. So fundamentally, that kind of base level of financial security is pretty hardwired into us as humans, and has been over millennia. The tried and tested way of building trust around the world, not just in the UK, US, Europe, around the world, is to put one human being in front of another. And we will talk about the role of technology, but for sure, you know, somebody I trust sitting alongside me, sitting opposite the other side of the table has got to be a key ingredient. Others, I mean, consumer duty is all about putting the client's needs first, giving primacy to the things that they really want. So certainly when we think about what is good, what does good look like, having a kind of laser-like focus on what it is that the client really needs and wants, and how much risk are they willing and able to take to get that. Sounds like a simple thing to do, but clearly it isn't. Having conversations, you know, as with any sort of equation, there are two sides to it. There is what the client wants or think they want, in terms of the lifestyle that they are looking to pursue, their goals, putting the kids through uni, retiring, passing on to the next generation, whatever it may be. And there's also the amount of money, the funds they've got to be able to fund those things, and the risk they're willing to take in order to achieve them. And holding all of those things in a conversation, probably a series of conversations, with the primacy of the client's goals foremost in the advisor's mind, I think is probably the second thing. Institutionally, I guess you call that establishing the mandate, but that is a way trickier thing to do than it sounds on paper, and great wealth managers know how to do it. And then a third thing, I suppose, would be delivering on that mandate. You know, financial services is a notoriously difficult thing to demonstrate value in. You get the report at the end of the period that says how your portfolio is done, but you know, is that really delivering value after fees for the risk that has been taken? Well, the only real way that you can articulate that is by talking to the client about the progress that they've made, the progress that the portfolio has made, given the mandate, the progress that they're making towards the goals, and to try and bring that alive. And clients can be very different. If you've got an accountant as a client, then that's one thing. Perhaps the numbers speak for themselves. If you've got an art teacher for a client, then perhaps it's all about the graphics. And I was at a party last weekend, and somebody asked me what I did for a living, and I explained the role that Dynamic Planner plays in almost half of all investment advice firms now. He said, you produce that lovely line, that graph that shows me that if I am above the middle line, then I'm okay. And that's the graph that helps me sleep at night. So for that particular character, it was all about the kind of graphic. But demonstrating value on an ongoing basis is absolutely part of the job, isn't it? To make sure that you're doing a quality job for your clients. So that's probably how I'd summarise it.
Very good, and sets up, I think, 3 questions I had. I'm just going to quickly reorder in my brain. One of them is I'm going to smush 2 questions together. One was about building trust in the industry, and the other one was about the role of AI, whether it was an opportunity or threat. Okay, let's move. Say you think it's an opportunity. So how would you balance? How do advisors and wealth managers go about balancing tech and trust?
Yeah, I mean, again, another really great question. If I go back 20 odd years from when we started the business, I would go into an advice firm and I would open my laptop and I would show them this technology. And I remember one very experienced, highly regarded advisor saying, "Ben, I don't need your technology. I've got this," he said, showing me a pen, and this, he said, showing me the back of the envelope, and said, that's all the technology I need. Now, times have changed, and maybe we're going to go on and talk about regulation, but certainly the regulator has technology in very much the forefront of its thinking, and it's thinking about targeted support and the new range of advice offers that may be coming our way. But we live in a completely different world now. You couldn't operate a advice firm, wealth manager, without technology. The costs just wouldn't work, let alone the risk that you'd be facing, let alone the inability to demonstrate value to a client. So I think we could take it as given that all of your listeners would assume that you have to be able to hold both of those things. Face to face, it could be over a video, but human to human advice, if we're talking about sort of mass affluent, high net worth clients alongside technology. Our approach is quite simple. Our job is to enable the advisor. Advisors are uniquely well placed as human beings to build relationships with other human beings. And that is essentially what people are buying into when they're buying into a trust-based relationship. I'd like to come back to what trust actually means in a tech-enabled world in a moment, but the role of technology is to unlock that trusted advice. So remove the drudgery, remove all of that preparation for the meeting, the reporting that I have to do, remove all of that kind of suitability assessment. Is this portfolio still suitable? Technology can do that now. We are monitoring 100 billion, we just passed 100 billion of assets on a daily basis last week, in fact, for very large numbers, hundreds of thousands of end clients and thousands of advisors. So the technology is able to aggregate that data from wherever it may sit in back offices or platforms and make sure that the advisor has got a really accurate version of events right in front of them when they're having the conversation. I say advisor because, another part of our view is that, technology is there for the client as well as the advisor, and it should be a seamless experience, right? So if you're a client, you should be able to see the same valuations as the advisor. You should be able to track your portfolio against your goals on a daily basis if that's what you want to do. Many people don't want to do that. They don't want to get into the kind of daily viewing, but if that's what the client wants, then it should be available for them. So the kind of, report, yes, I've got to do good reporting. The technology should do that. The administration, AI is both a threat and an opportunity, huge in both camps. But in terms of opportunity, the ability to remove things like summarizing the conversation that I had with the client. You know, we can record it, we can transcribe it, we can summarize it and play it back to you and build it automatically into your financial plan. Brilliant. That means I don't have to spend 2 hours doing that post having a meeting with a client. We have got what is typically 6 or 7 hours of advisor time putting the annual progress review together down to 4 or 5 minutes. I was with one firm recently. They were saying if we can't do it in 4 or 5 minutes, we know we're doing something wrong. So this is technology's job, Julian, to liberate, unlock the trusted advice that happens between two human beings, one a professional and the other a client who needs and wants some help.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. I don't want to think you're using the Jedi mind trick on me, because I promised I was going to move on to regulation next, but you flagged it up. Let's go with you mentioned consumer duty at the start, but if you were head of the FCA for the other day, what would you focus your mind on?
Oh gosh, that is a great question. I mean, I've been in and around this industry for over 25 years. I remember contributing to the Sandler Review report in 2004 and saying, look, there's this huge demand for advice. You know, at the shallow end of the swimming pool, it can be really quite simple. And obviously, as you get more sophisticated, it needs to be more holistic. But I think the challenge that the sort of fence that the FCA or whichever regulator has been in that 25 years has stumbled over each time, every time, is where is that boundary? So today, targeted support is being muted and looks like an extremely exciting opportunity, I believe, for the industry to provide, you know, common sense, good advice with a small a, guidance with a capital G, to very large numbers of end clients. And I think that will just provide a rising tide for all boats, frankly. I think it will flood into a vacuum that's needed. Yeah, right now you can't, it's very difficult, or some firms will say it's very difficult to answer basic questions. Should I top up my ISA? Should I top up my SIP? Should I take a bit more risk? Well, you know, we have to do a holistic fact find to find that out. Shouldn't really be that. And I think the targeted support as currently drafted, the proposals are currently drafted, clearly intend to get into the ribs of that challenge. I think the key question, and you know, it's a 250-page odd document, so we're still working our way through it, participating in industry consultations and so on. But as of this morning, there was a call which the FCA was on this morning. Yeah, the heart of it is the question. So I am answering your question now. If I was FCA today, I would focus on where are we going to draw the line between guidance and advice, and that really pivots around how much personal information are you going to gather in that process. Are you going to gather a risk profile? Are you going to gather more factual information? Because the regulator essentially is saying, look, in our policy sprints, we found that the more personal information that's gathered, the more likely it is that the client thinks that they've been personally advised. So I would focus on that, trying to thread that needle, Julian. That's what I would do.
No, fair enough. We talked a bit about client communications. I'm going to go into one of your special subjects first. I think we've only got about 2 hours of battery on our camera, so we can't let you go on too long on this. But how would you explain risk to someone who doesn't work in investment?
Yeah, great question. Risk is the chance that something bad might happen in the future. And, you know, we get used to risk in all sorts of walks of life. You get in a car, you drive down the road, there's the chance that you might get pranged by somebody pulling out quickly. You get in an aeroplane, there is a very remote chance, but there is a chance that something bad could happen. And, you know, in most or many walks of life, Julian, we get used to risk. I think the issue with investment risk, if I was talking to somebody in the pub, is that so few people actually actively invest, i.e. outside of the pension. I think if you were to imagine the UK population, only those people in one end of the goal, the penalty area, I'm not a soccer player, but the penalty area, make up the population of people who will invest. So it's not like the TV game, watching the game on TV, where you then go down the pub and talk to your mates about how was that. Because relatively few people actually invest, unlike getting in a car or going in an aeroplane, you don't have a lot of fellow human beings to talk about investment risk. So I think it's the chance that something bad might happen. As an industry, we've not been great at finding ways to express that. And we feel very clearly that we have got the best way that we know about, and that is to use, in the industry parlance, ex-ante returns, but forward-looking descriptors of the potential for something bad to happen. Probably the best way I can describe that is, imagine that you're sat on your summer holidays on a beach, and you've got a beautiful calm sea in front of you, sandy beach, calm sea, birds flying overhead, and you think this is beautiful, and I'm on holiday for 10 days, and for 9 days you get just beautiful calm weather, right? On the 9th day, you're looking back, 9/10 of the time, you've got a really calm, beautiful, looks like a very low risk situation. But on the 10th day, a storm whips up, and what you didn't know is that there are actually some rocks just off the coast a little bit, which can cause swimmers real issues if you didn't know what you were doing, if you weren't an expert. And, a forward-looking view of risk would say, well, do you know what? Actually, those rocks are there. And with these conditions, actually, even an experienced swimmer could find themselves in difficulty. Historically, what we've done as an industry is say, over the last 10 days, only nine were safe. Let's forget the really extreme circumstances we had on the 10th and give the statistic, the customer statistic of historic volatility. And I think that's where the industry is a bit tripped up, and I think the work that we do, thinking with managers very deeply about where are the rocks in their portfolio, if I can call it that, how can we describe the potential returns and risk that the portfolio represents when we're taking a forward-looking view of the future, and we do that in increasingly sophisticated ways. We've got a 75 class asset model now, which is really, particularly as people begin to think, managers begin to think about things like private markets, private debt, how do you actually assess the risk of those, the potential for something bad to happen?
Oh, very good. Actually, I guess I can widen that out then, because a question I always ask is, how would you describe your approach to client communications and finding the right clients for the right, I would talk about the right client, meaning someone that who's going to come along the journey that the investor, fresh investor, was hoping they'd come along on.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question again. People learn and like to be supported in many different ways. As I just said, I think for some people it's all about numbers. We have an app called Tram, for example, and Tram basically will serve you on a daily basis. This is the progress against your goals, this is the progress against your risk, here's the latest news, and here, as an example, one of the things it does, it will show you where in the world you're invested. Now, on Liberation Day, on April the 2nd or 3rd or whatever it was, we saw a real uptick in people looking at that map. People wanted to know, am I in the US? Am I in China? Obviously people using Tram right now are self-selecting as people that really want to have technology aid their experience with their advisor. It's not a replacement, it's a complement. We are living increasingly in a technology age, in a smartphone age, in a digital age, and therefore having those tools in your kit bag for clients that really want to be able to connect with you in that way is very important. Some people are very happy to come in for a in-person meeting once a year, and that's the journey that they're going on. I think we can all see, though, the direction of travel. We're moving towards a much more transparent world. If I look at the demographics of the last 1 million people that were profiled by dynamic planner. They're getting younger, so I think that's an exciting thing for the industry. People are accessing and approaching advice earlier. We can see that. But equally, those people who are, as you say, on a journey are getting older. Older people, typically their risk profile will reduce slowly over time. They will want to take less risk with their money, and therefore actually the nature of how you're supporting them, the nature of those conversations, the nature of the reporting that you're doing, risk targeting becomes much more important, particularly if you're in drawdown with a constrained pot, making sure that the client isn't, making sure that you're talking to the client about some of the peculiar risks, sequence of returns risk, for example, that they face, and that you're able to report to them how they're doing, even in a down market, is really key. So I guess I'm saying, tech is greater tech adoption is happening across all demographics, but clearly where your client is in terms of their objectives and how they like to be supported will vary person to person.
Good stuff. I'm going to touch on ESG sustainability briefly now, and do so with the provocative question, statement: ESG is dead, long live ESG 2.0. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a nice way of putting it.
Thank you.
Nice way of putting it. I think ESG is really important. We know that 70%, so we profile tens of thousands of end clients for our advisor customers. I'm not sure what the latest numbers are, probably in the six figures now. And we know that ESG, sustainability as we would call it, it's important a little to a lot to about 70% of people. So more than 2/3 of people think that the sustainability of their investments, they would like essentially to do more good than harm.
Mm-hmm.
It's only 30% of people that really don't care. It's returns at all cost. And that's a sophisticated instrument that we're using there. It's a psychometric instrument. It's not straight do you care or don't you. It's helping make some quite careful trade-offs that you need to make when you're thinking about a future and something as complicated and as complex as sustainability. So people care. I think that's the first point, Julian. And so there should be an ESG 2.0 for sure. Obviously, SDR labelling has somewhat not met the aspirations one has to assume of the regulator. Last time I looked, which is a week or two ago, I think there were fewer than 100 solutions that have been labelled, 100 funds. Obviously, the decision not to go into MPS, which is obviously a huge part of the market. I guess if I was to use your numbering system, ESG 1.0, the kind of demand side, I think we were getting there in terms of helping clients have really good conversations with advisors and saying, look, this is really important to me and I want to make an impact, or actually, this is somewhat important to me, but returns have to take precedence. We were getting there and are getting there. I think it's the supply side and the articulation of the sustainability of a solution on the supply side that is so difficult. Now, one of the reasons it's difficult, is that there are lots of different ways of delivering sustainability. I had a number of conversations with our asset management customers, and all houses have different views as to what sustainability means to them, quite rightly. I can argue, and we don't need to go into it here, but it's not difficult to argue whether a tech stock is or is not sustainable, right? Mm-hmm. You need to look at scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, and as soon as you get onto scope 3 emissions, you're in a completely different world. Yeah? It's not difficult to argue both sides of actually we need fossil fuels. How else are we going to build the wind turbines or the electric cars? So these things are complicated, they are multifaceted, and I guess the analysis that was put in front of advisors in terms of the deep analytics that great analytics houses do, both in-house but externally as well, it's really complicated for the average advisor and certainly the average client to be able to assess, what does this sustainability ESG rating on a peer basis actually mean, and how does it relate to the fact that I'd rather do more good than harm? So I think the shame is that the SDR labelling system hasn't quite taken off as I'd hoped, because I think we need a simple way of articulating the manager's view within reason on what the objectives of the fund and I hope portfolio are. It can't be simplistic, but it needs to be simple enough to understand. And I think I very much hope that we can find, as an industry, with the regulator, a way to make that happen, because I think the prize is really great. Right? I think if you talk to managers, of course people care about the planet. It's just good business to care about having a sustainable business, and that is a challenge worth fighting for.
Excellent. More personal question now. What was your path into this business, and what do you think you'd be doing if you hadn't taken the path? Well, I know you live for this, so obviously you can't conceive what else you'd be doing.
So I was doing a degree in environmental science and geography when a great friend of mine said, come down here. He was working at an asset manager who will remain nameless, but they're a very big US manager. And you can come and make some money for the summer. And I did, and that firm put adverts in the Sunday papers and on the undergrounds, and people called up to invest in their PEPs, and I was one of those students that you got at the end of the phone who gave advice. Actually, the company was fined a lot for what happened that summer, a lot. Yeah, I mean, I at the time I was a student, I went on to study, back to my studies, and it wasn't until later I was at a PwC as a strategy consultant, and a partner walked in the room and said, "Does anyone know anything about PEPs?" And I put my hand up, and he said, "Right, you're on this job." And I worked then actually on, I worked with a number of banks and insurance companies, really helping build distribution strategies, typically with technology involved somewhere. So I worked with Direct Line, I worked on the launch of Egg Invest, which was the first, if not one of the first, internet banks. And I was hooked, Julian. I thought this thing called the internet could be a huge transformer for access to advice and the ability to deliver it at scale, deliver trusted advice at scale, and I've been hooked ever since. I have to say that if you go back to the 80s and you look at what happened in 1987, and as I got on in my career, I did. I lived through 87, through 91, ultimately through 08, and you look at what happened to people who had invested through those PEPs and those newspapers, and how people lost up to 40% of their portfolios, people who could ill afford to lose that money. And you look at now the world we live in, post GFC, 10 years plus after RDR, people are in risk profile, risk aligned, internationally diversified portfolios. Markets versus Liberation Day are back where they were. Risk profile 5 and 7 are in the money on a 12-month basis. So I think we're doing some good in the world. I think people are better off as a result of the kind of work that we do. Yeah.
Alternative universe? You'd still be back at that nameless company?
Oh, no. I mean, I'd be a farmer.
Oh.
I'd be a farmer. In fact, my wife has just bought some sheep. So I may still yet be a farmer.
Yeah, I see you got some land to put them on. They're not just in the Goss sitting room or something.
No,
right? Okay,
no, they're
good.
in the field next door.
Yeah. Very good. Good alternative. Brief one now. What advice would you give your younger self on your first day in the business?
Work hard, be ambitious, be kind. I think actually the most successful people I know are generally very kind. They'll give time, they'll give their attention, money, resources to others, and I think that gets overlooked actually.
Nice one. Last two questions. One is back to business. Best and worst case scenarios for the future of UK wealth management?
I think we're potentially in for boom times. The demand for advice is inexorable. I think unlocking it, which I think the regulations will help with actually, I think it will create a rising tide for all boats. But we live in a very volatile world and people need advice, they want it. It's our job as technology partner to open up and unlock it, but I think there's significant opportunities. I guess worst case, the FCA doesn't grasp this particular nettle and we don't move forward as we could, you know, and that would be a great shame for UK PLC as well as UK population.
Very good. And last question then, we a couple of personal recommendations. One would be a book, doesn't have to be investment, but it can be, and the other one is a free hit, just passing on general happiness to people.
Yeah, so the book is So Good They Can't Ignore You, right, by Cal Newport. He's a great writer on work. And it comes from a Steve Martin quote, who when asked, the comedian, when asked, how did you get where you are now? His answer was to be so good they can't ignore me. But it's a book written for teens, maybe one for your kids. Yes. I've certainly given it to mine. Because there's this idea that actually in life you should live your dreams and follow your dreams, and it doesn't work out like that always. You know, actually a lot of people who are most successful and most happy had to work quite hard to be really good at something before that happiness came. So it's a great book. Yeah.
On the free hit?
Do an AI course. That would be my suggestion. You know, I did 18 months ago, I did the IBM Intro to Generative AI. It's, when you understand how this stuff actually works and doesn't work, it's eye-opening. And I think clearly as technologists, it's really important for us to understand, and we've got a big program delivering AI into Dynamic Planner over the coming weeks and months. But it's eye-opening for anybody who is using ChatGPT or whatever model of choice.
Very self-improving choices. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for your time today.
No, thank you. Been great to talk.
Brilliant stuff. And thank you, of course, as always, very much for watching. Do look out for further Choice Words videos as they are published.